In 1239, Henry and Eleanor had a son. Simon sponsored the baptism. They chose the name Edward, after the great Anglo-Saxon king Edward the Confessor. This French royal family had adopted English patriotism. But as the political crisis deepened, Simon became increasingly committed to the total reform of government. Eventually, the crisis became a full-blooded civil war, and by the time the war ended in 1264, Henry and his son Edward were Simon's prisoners, and he took over the country. Simon now set about inventing an entirely new form of government, one which was based on the deeply rooted English principle of consent. In 1265, he summoned a meeting of the country, a parliament, at Westminster, to endorse his government. He summoned not only barons and bishops, but also 2 knights from each shire, and, most extraordinary, representatives from all the boroughs, the towns.
He said he was acting in the king's name, but the king didn't have much to do with what was going on. In fact, Simon had established what we might see as a modern state. There was a written constitution, a symbolic king, a powerful leading minister, and there was a parliament with representatives of the church, the countryside, represented by great landowners and gentry, and of towns. We might see it like that. They didn't. To most people at the time, this was clearly the tyranny of Simon de Montfort.
By now, Prince Edward was a grown man, 25 years old, and it was his job to overthrow this tyranny and restore the crown. First, of course, he had to escape imprisonment at Hereford Castle. The prince was allowed to exercise his horse on the common, so he wore out his guards' horses, racing with them, and then jumped onto a fresh horse that had been brought for the purpose and disappeared into the distance. What followed is known as the Battle of Evesham, at the end of which Simon de Montfort was chopped up into pieces. Henry was back on his throne, but it was Edward who was now running the country. This tall, muscular warrior, he was called Longshanks, had the military skill to crush the remaining rebels and the good sense not to punish them afterwards. He understood how to make peace and accepted the proposition that the king must respect legal limits on his power and consult with the nation. He also habitually spoke English, the first royal to do so since 1066. Parliament made him the steward of England. De Montfort's revolution had left its mark. The old king died in 1272, having reigned for 56 years. Edward's main interest in life was chivalry and warfare. His natural costume was armor. It had been since he was a child. When Henry died, Edward was out of the country on crusade. He came home to be crowned with his queen, yet another Eleanor, in 1273. The daughter of the King of Castile, she'd already borne Edward 6 children. They would have 10 more. England now had something like a settled system of government. Edward confirmed the existing charters, including Magna Carta, and was able to leave the business of government and justice to his council and judges. His main concern was how to gather the money to conduct his military interests without provoking more rebellions.
He hit on a brilliant policy. He invented nationalism. To demonstrate that his kingship was rooted in English tradition, he and Eleanor conducted the most remarkable ceremony at Glastonbury in 1278. In 90, the monks of Glastonbury had found graves which were believed to be those of King Arthur and Queen Guinevere. The bones had been placed in the Lady Chapel. Now, 88 years later, King Edward carried the bones of Arthur and Queen Eleanor those of Guinevere. They put the legendary remains in a magnificent tomb in the main church.
Edward presented himself as a new Arthur. All this was part of a wider campaign to give his kingship the power of myth, and so unite the country behind him. This unity was going to be needed when he claimed supremacy over all Wales. It worked. When the Welsh princes rejected his claim, he was able to raise the money to make an enormous military effort. He became the first English king to totally conquer this mountainous territory. One of its princes, Llywelyn, was killed in battle. His head was mounted on the Tower of London. The other, Dafydd, was put on trial for treason before Parliament and sentenced to be drawn, hanged, beheaded, and quartered. This was a savagery previously unknown in English law. The English system of shires and hundreds was now extended to cover all Wales, and the conquest was emphasized by huge state-of-the-art royal castles like this one at Carnarvon. Edward's war chest was based on a new source of royal finance. In 1275, Parliament granted him the right to charge customs duties on wool. See how useful it was having a parliament with merchants to agree to taxes. Nevertheless, popular rhymes suggested trouble was brewing. The king he wants to get our gold, the queen would like our lands to hold. His war chest had come from Jewish moneylenders, but now they had no more to give. Never mind, the Jews could serve another purpose. Italian bankers would provide advances on the customs duties and collect the taxes themselves, and Edward could unite the country behind him in persecuting the Jews.
650 years later, the Third Reich would adopt his entire program. First, Edward decreed that they were a threat to the country. Their movements and activities were restricted. To identify them easily, all Jews were obliged to wear a yellow patch in the shape of a star.
Next, he arrested all the heads of Jewish households. Over 300 were taken to the Tower of London and executed, while others were murdered in their homes. Finally, in 1290, the king banished all Jews from the country. By now, the armoured overlord was a national hero. When his wife Queen Eleanor died in the same year, worn out by childbirths, his own grief was turned into a major display of national mourning. Her body was ceremonially carried from Lincoln to Westminster, and a memorial cross erected at every one of the 12 resting places, including here at Charing in London. Charing Cross. It was time to enlarge the kingdom again. In 1296, he led an army to enforce his claim to Scotland. Edinburgh was seized, and the King of Scotland, stripped of his crown, was imprisoned in the Tower of London. Scottish kings were crowned enthroned on the Stone of Scone, or Stone of Destiny. Edward had it moved to London and put in the coronation chair in Westminster Abbey. Edward appointed a trio of Englishmen to run the country. Actually, his rule in Scotland was not noticeably harsh or unjust, but that was beside the point. His own conjuring of the demon of nationalism was turning against him. Ordinary Scots began to discover a feeling of national identity. A popular Scottish resistance movement grew, led by William Wallace, better known nowadays, outside Scotland at least, as Braveheart. Most of Scotland had broken free before he was defeated. And then in 1306 rebellion began again, and Robert the Bruce was crowned King of Scotland. By now, Edward, the Hammer of the Scots, was old and sick. He tried to lead an army back into Scotland, but it became obvious he'd never get there. A few miles north of Carlisle, on his deathbed, he gave instructions to his 23-year-old heir, Edward, Prince of Wales.
100 knights were to crusade, carrying his heart. The army should carry his bones to defeat Scotland, and the prince was not to have anything further to do with his very, very close friend, Piers Gaveston. The king was dead. Edward II was ready to party.
Edward